Washington Post is laying off a third of its workforce across both the newsroom and its business operations, a massive blow at a storied newspaper that has struggled in recent years to stay profitable and retain subscribers. The cuts reportedly affect more than 300 of the approximately 800 journalists in the newsroom and include eliminating its sports desk and books section entirely. The Post's executive editor said the changes, though painful, were meant to, quote, reinvent the paper for a new era. For more on these cuts and their implications, we're joined now by Marty Barron, who was the editor of the Washington Post from 2012 until 2021. Welcome back to the NewsHour.
Thanks for having me.
You have described this as among the darkest days in the Post's history. What do these layoffs mean for the paper's mission and its ability to continue doing in-depth, substantial reporting?
Well, I think it's important to keep in mind just how widespread these cuts are. Not only the sports desk, the books department, but pretty much the entire arts department, eviscerating the foreign staff, largely eviscerating the local staff as well. So these are huge, huge cuts, and they're going to do enormous damage to the newspaper's ability to cover its community, to cover the country, and to cover the world in all the ways that it should.
The executive editor, Matt Murray, said today that the paper's structure was built for a different era and that refocusing on what he calls these core coverage areas like politics and national security will help the Post better navigate technological change, shifting audience habits, cost pressures. Do you buy that argument?
Well, I think Matt is doing a really good job as editor of the Post. The Post is doing extraordinary journalism every single day, and I commend them for that. I admire what they're doing. That said, they seem to have announced a new strategy just about once a year now, saying that it would better position themselves for the future, and none of those things have worked. I don't think what they're doing now helps position them for the future. It diminishes the brand, it diminishes the coverage, it offers less to their readers. They're going to have fewer subscribers as a result of this, probably not more. So I understand why Matt is saying that. He has to say something positive about what's happening, but I don't think there's very much positive to say.
You served as editor.
Greetings. Welcome to the second episode of T.Q.M Insights and Stories. My name is John Frahm. And this week what we're going to focus on is what's happening at the Washington Post. And I'm going to give you some personal insights that I have to the matter. I've updated the reading list, so we'll touch on that. And then I want to provide two more stories on the importance of orbiting around our customers. Now, there is a method to my madness about this, because as leaders, whether you're a shift lead, supervisor, manager, director, CEO of a company, if you don't know intimate details about your internal, external customers, you're ignorant. You're blind. You really don't know what to do. Oh, you can fall into success. Blind squirrel finds a nut from time to time. Oh yeah, it happens. It happens all the time. But there is a method to my madness, because you might want to say, John, I want to get into vision. I want to get into managing performance. I want to get into cost of quality. I want to get into all these things. But none of that matters unless you know who your internal, external customers are and that you know them intimately. What products and services do you provide them? What do they do with what you provide them? And are there any gaps between what you provide them and what they need? That's power. That information is powerful. And if you don't have that, you're ignorant. You're blind. You really can't lead your teams effectively. And you can't manage performance. And I'll explain why in the future. So this is the foundation, if you will, of knowing your customers. And the Washington Post story is going to tie right into it. Point number 2, yes, I'm on the manufacturing side. And the video, the way it starts off, you almost might look like this podcast is all about printing, and that's not the case. In other words, what I'm sharing with you can apply to all aspects of manufacturing, whether you manufacture airplanes or cars or iPhones or HVAC equipment. It all applies, as well as the service industry, whether you're in restaurant business or hotels. But I just happen to be, because I love printing, that's why I did the video that way. But I just happen to come from the newspaper industry. And so there is, so all these things are transferable. Okay? So I just want to make that point. So let's cut right to the chase and talk about the Washington Post. First off, think about Edward Deming's quote. Now, there is some debate, by the way, if this is really Edward Deming quote, that he said it exactly this way, but definitely when you read his work, you will get this flavor, this theme that comes out of it, that it's not necessary to change. Survival is not mandatory. It's not necessary to change. Survival is not mandatory. And I've always guessed, and this is a guess on my part, that what would have caused Deming to say something like this, if not exactly these words, was likely the automobile industry. Because remember when I said to you with Lee Iacocca, he was very blunt on the fact that they just got totally blindsided by the Japanese car manufacturers, that they would come in and just ultimately dominate, especially when it comes to cars, not necessarily trucks, but cars. And they would come in and dominate and decimated Detroit. It was horrible, but they never saw it coming, all right, because they had a blind spot. Let me strengthen up this argument by giving an example at the Baltimore Sun many years ago, this well over 10 years ago. There was a large gathering of the executive committee, which is managers and up, large auditorium, and we were going through what subscribers were saying about us. And this question was put forth in a negative way and a positive way. So the positive question was, how much engagement do you have with the Baltimore Sun on a weekly basis? And the percentage was very low. I don't remember that percentage, but it was low. It was in the teens. So it was shocking. I remember the presenter said, this and the next one keeps me up at night. And the next question was, can you live without us? And that's putting the same question, getting to the same issue, but put it in a different way. And as I recall, 88% of our subscribers at the time said, yeah, we can live without you. Now that requires more explanation, doesn't it? So for example, I love strawberry ice cream. And there's certain places that I go to that has the best strawberry ice cream. Now, can I live without it? Sure, but I'm not going to. I mean, I'll skip a meal so I can have some strawberry ice cream. So it does require some additional discussion, but it is alarming that the engagement, the interaction with the products and services the Baltimore Sun was offering is low, and 88% of the subscribers said, yeah, we can live without you. And what the years since then have shown is that probably about 88% of our subscribers have gone away. Absolutely remarkable. So when I say blind spot, that may not be entirely accurate in every situation, meaning that like we know what the issues are, that we don't have an adequate demand for the products and services that we're offering, but we don't want to recognize it. We don't want to acknowledge it. We don't want to do something about it. Okay? So I mean blind spot in two ways, I suppose, to clarify. Blind spot in the sense that you're just totally ignorant of the facts. You don't even know what your customers are saying about you. Or perhaps you do know, but you don't want to acknowledge it. You don't want to deal with it. There's almost like a blanket of sleep that is over businesses at times. Now, we're just giving the example of news media, and I mean this for television as well and cable and everything else, is that there's such a poor amount of journalism, regardless of your political affiliation, where news organizations are not, they're They're not producing content that's well written or well produced. It's not informative. It's not interesting. It's not intellectually honest. It's hard to find. It's hard to find quality journalism. There's a lot of cheap journalism, but it's hard to find quality journalism, to say the least. So, and history has shown, oh wow, yeah, 88% of your readers said, yeah, I could live without you, and 88% of the readers have basically shown, yeah, Baltimore Sun, we could live without you. And so when I was hired at the Baltimore Sun, years before that, so I'm going back now like over 20 years, I was told that if I accepted this job as the press room manager, and I'm successful, then I can write my ticket in the newspaper industry. I could go work for anybody. And because I'd have a job for life. Now, that didn't prove exactly to be true. I'm still employed, and I'm grateful that I have. But oh my goodness, the cuts and just the reductions have been tremendous. Just like in the Baltimore Sun, just that by itself, it's in the thousands. I won't get into that right now. But as soon as I was hired, probably within 2 to 3 months, because I did some investigation, people were asking me, well, how hard is the job? How hard is it to be the press room manager of the Baltimore Sun? Because there were a lot of issues to deal with. And I said, well, as difficult as those issues are, and they are difficult, I mean, difficult in every sense of the word, my greatest concern is that we're going out of business. Now, this is a time when Tribune, you can look at the public record. So we're going back to, this would have been like early 2002. Tribune Corporation had $4 billion in revenue and $1 billion in margin. Okay, so you can look at the public, because they own television and they own many different assets along with newspapers, and the Chicago Cubs. So they were diversified, to say the least. But they were, I'd call them a media powerhouse. I mean, $4 billion in revenue and $1 billion in margin. That's pretty darn good. And they have a press room manager who's saying, yeah, you guys don't know it yet, but you're going out of business. Now, how can I say that? Well, because newspapers hit their peak in the mid-1960s, and they've been declining ever since. So my point was, I discovered you're losing more customers than we're gaining. We are losing more customers than we're gaining. Now, did I say that once in a while? Did I just say it a couple of times? No, I said it enough where my director at the time had to pull me aside and said, would you please stop telling people that we're going out of business? And I said, yeah, but Steve, we are. We are. We're losing more customers than we're gaining, and the customers that we're gaining are paying a much lower rate. You see, there's a complacency. It's almost like a blanket of sleep. I heard a preacher put it this way, that it's almost like a point of animated death, where when you're asleep, you're concerned about fantasies, like perhaps you're having a bad dream and a monster is chasing you, or perhaps you're sailing off to Treasure Island and all your dreams are being fulfilled, and that's all you're concerned about. But the truth is, those are all fantasies. When you're in this animated death, this sleep. And then when you're in such a state, you're not concerned about reality. Maybe even resist reality. That your house is on fire. That the thief is at your door. Or in terms of business, your competition is about to clean your clock. And you don't even realize it. You excuse it away. Whatever it might be. I suppose it could be a million different things about how one rationalizes such things. And then the other thing I want you to know is, don't think because you raise the alarm that people are going to think well of you. When people are in this animated death or this blanket of sleep, they don't want to be woken up. They don't want to be bothered, because it requires people to make the second decision where they have to look back at their career and say, oh my goodness, I was making perhaps okay decisions at times, but on the bigger issues, I'm ignoring the most fundamental issues that put my business at stake. I have to start making second decisions. What happens in the newspaper industry, again, we just throw things up against the wall and see what sticks, versus let's start collecting some data and understand when a customer says, are they being like literal? Oh, you could live without us? But I don't want to, but I could live without you because you're not oxygen. right? Is that how you mean it? And what is it? So are we not providing the quality of journalism that we think we're providing? Or perhaps we're providing the quality of journalism, but those articles, those videos are not getting to the right people. In other words, we're lacking personalization. We're making it too hard on our readers to read, to enjoy the products and services that we provide. So it could be multiple issues. Like I always tell the press room, and yes, people roll their eyes when I say stuff like this, to press and packaging. You know what the job is in the press room? It's to make reading enjoyable. The job of any press room in the newspaper industry is to make reading enjoyable by producing a quality product. Okay? And in packaging, their job is to create a response. Well, how do you create a response? Well, by putting the right inserts in the right package so somebody will go off and buy something. So in printing, what are you doing? Oh, I want to make reading enjoyable by producing a quality product and getting it there on time because that makes reading enjoyable. And on the inserting side, I want to have high insert integrity. Why? So somebody goes, buys something. I create a reaction. And these are the things that are overlooked. So I just wanted to give you a real life example. And likewise, what I would tell you is that the Washington Post is in trouble because they're ignorant, because they're blind. They're talented leaders. They're far more educated than I am. Their gifts and their abilities are far greater than what I can offer. But they're ignorant and they're blind. Why? How do I know that? Because they're guessing. They're just throwing ideas up on the wall and seeing what sticks. The Washington Post has so many advantages. They have a rich history. Yes, they're left-leaning, but that's okay because the vast majority of the people that they serve are left-leaning, being in the Capitol as well as in Northern Virginia. So they got tons of customers that agree with their worldview. Their customer base is highly educated, a lot of college graduates, and they love to read. They love to read good books. But yet, and there's so much news to coverage. Oh my goodness, you could shake a stick at it. So despite the fact of being put in such a position, when they always say about real estate, location, location, location. Well, the Washington Post has a great location to cover. You've got an audience that would agree with your politically, your worldview. You've got a ton of them. You got millions of them. You've got a ton of stories to cover. You got a rich history. But yet, reportedly, you're losing $100 million a year. And a few years back, it was $77 million a year. And in 2014, are you ready for this? They were losing, reportedly, $7 million. And the reason I know that is because I asked them. You see, after Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post for $250 million in 2013, I was invited to their skybox to watch a baseball game in D.C. And there were executives there. So I got to introduce myself and just ask them questions. And like I always do, wherever I go, I'm just always asking questions, trying to glean and learn what's going on, understanding the times in which we live in. And they were excited. They were so excited that because Jeff Bezos had set the expectation, all they had to do to satisfy him was to break even. That was the bar, break even. And they were thrilled at that, absolutely thrilled. And I asked them, how far away are you? And they were $7 million away. And so they were taking steps to reduce expenses, including outsourcing. So for example, the Baltimore Sun, my operation that I used to run, we produced more weekly inserts than probably anyone in the country, and as far as the newspaper goes. Because our own work was about 25 million inserts a week, let's say, and then we add their work on top of it, and it was about 45 million. And I always ask them, I said, why do you have us do this work for you? And they go, we don't want to be bothered with it. It's just a nuisance to us, so we'd rather give it to you. I said, okay, hey, I'm happy to do it. So they're buying inserters and bringing that work back in, and that probably saved them about $1 million. Now they've got $7 million to get to. I'm just pointing out them bringing that work back in would have would have contributed $1 million towards that goal. But they really felt that they weren't going to necessarily break even in 2014, but they were set to go from 2015 and beyond. And so as I'm listening to all the changes that they're making to make Jeff Bezos to hit that bar that he set, they asked me at the end, so what do you think? Don't you think we're in a great position? And I said, no, because I don't think you're getting to the root of the issue. See, because I asked them what their volume used to be and what's their volume today in terms of the number of subscribers. And I went back and I described how they're put in a position to flourish. And so the question is, why aren't you flourishing? For all the reasons I've already stated. How could you not be profitable at this point? How could you not be achieving a great margin? Whether it's through the paper, whether it's online, podcasting, streaming, how could you not already be incredibly successful? And so I asked them, what do your customers have to say about you? And they didn't have an answer. In other words, how much are your customers engaged with your products and your services? And they didn't know. It doesn't mean that other leaders didn't know, by the way, but they didn't know. You see, so that's why I'm saying they were guessing, and they're still guessing. And so the point being is, they're not putting their customers in the orbit. Everyone but their customers. Okay, so they're circling around everything else but their customers. And I would begin with their readers. Because you see, whether you're liberal or conservative or libertarian, you know what you want? Value. See, we're addressing this from not a political standpoint or anything of that nature or being conservative or liberal. The Washington Post doesn't need to change at all. Yes, it's left-leaning. Fine. The vast majority of those that live in Washington, D.C. and Northern Virginia are left-leaning. You've got all kinds of customers who agree with you. Go get them. Get in the game. But all customers, regardless of their political affiliation, want value. So you need to go ask your customers, what products and services do I provide you? What do you do with what I provide you? And what are the gaps? And this is the key one. What are the gaps between what I provide you and what you need? Every customer wants value, and that is what's overlooked. And so my point to you is, think about this. How blind, how ignorant are they? Well, from 2014, you went from believing that you're going to break even, and you were delighted by that, losing only $7 million, to losing then $77 million and $100 million. I mean, you really have to, and this is me being a little snarky, but you really have to go out of your way to lose that kind of money. And then sadly, what happens? You fail everyone. You fail your newsroom because you got to lay off a bunch of people. You fail all the support departments, whether it's finance, advertising, manufacturing. Everyone always overlooks operation, by the way. Operations, printing facilities have been devastated, but nobody talks about us. But you fail everyone, even the remaining readers, as the former editor pointed out, because they're going to get less coverage now, not more. So the point that I'm making is, why is the Washington Post struggling? Or because they're guessing. Why are they guessing? Because they're not putting the customer in the middle. Unions are fighting to be in the middle. Jeff Bezos is fighting to be in the middle. The new leadership's fighting to be in the middle. Everyone's fighting to be in the middle. Everyone's worried about their rights. But if you put the customer in the middle and get to the heart of the matter, which is there's no demand for this product. Why is there no demand for the product? There's no demand for news anymore? Is that what we're saying? I think people are hungry for news. But they don't, but they value their time, and they don't want their time wasted anymore. So why is the Washington Post struggling? Case in point, same reason Detroit struggled. They got blindsided. and they don't know their customers very well, and they're guessing. Yes, could something stick to the wall and just by happenstance, they're incredibly successful? Well, if that ever happens, it will be despite themselves, not because of themselves. And let me also make this final point. They're smarter than I am. They're more educated, they're more gifted, they're more talented. The Washington Post team is incredibly gifted individuals, but their parts don't equal the sum. So I admit they have so many much stronger leaders than myself. The difference between me and them is I go talk to my customers. That's my point. Like when I was giving you examples last week, I wasn't boasting. I was telling you what T.Q.M is capable of doing. I didn't come up with this. I didn't write these books. I'm just reading and listening and applying what other people have told me, which is why I'm passing it along to you. Well, I guess that's enough on the Washington Post. But I wanted to give you that insight in what I shared with them all of those years ago, and it's a real tragedy. Oh, and they missed opportunities. Before I move on. So you can double check me on this, but there was an article I read several years ago where the founders of Politico worked for the Washington Post. And they went to the leadership of the Washington Post and said, hey, we want to do this thing. And they described it, and it was Politico. And the Washington Post said, no, thank you, we're not interested. Missed opportunity. One more. The daughter of the owner of the Washington Post at the time, of the Graham family, she knew the founder of Facebook. And they had already pretty much finalized a deal for the Washington Post, or the greater corporation, to fund Facebook. And instead, he allowed them to back out of the deal and go get funding from the San Francisco groups, right? The venture capitalists, the typical venture capitalists that you see for technology groups out of San Francisco. And so again, that losing that opportunity, oh my goodness, it's probably in the billions of dollars, I would guess. So there are eBay went to newspapers and said, hey, before they were eBay, hey, do you want to fund us? Do you want to give us your classified so we can have content that we could put on as far as bringing buyers and sellers together? And newspapers missed that opportunity. We're always missing opportunities because we're not thinking about our customers. Instead, we're more interested in our individual rights and fighting with one another internally versus looking outward. I think that covers it. But again, I'm sharing with you information, real information, firsthand, primary source. I'm talking to executives, national baseball game. And I wish it would have worked out differently for them. And I don't know, if the Washington Post, their only strategy right now is, cut themselves to prosperity. And until they recognize their ignorance, I don't have any hope for them. Next, we have a slide here that I have updated, that you've seen this slide before, and it had a list of books, and I added In Search of Excellence, which was one of the first books I read. I can't believe I left it off the list. And then also we need a good statistician book, which is in the bottom right-hand corner, right? We need to have some basics on statistics, which I'll get into in the future, okay? But I wanted to point out those two books were added. Now then, finally, orbiting around customers. Let me give you two quick examples. Orbiting around customers. So I was a press room manager in Mary Loma, and we did an employee survey. Orbiting around customers, asking our customers, what do you need? Yes, that's right. Employees are customers. And 23% of the press employees of the Mary Loma said that they were well trained. And I was the new press room manager. And I said, well, I can fix this. So I went out and the organization gave me $3,000 or $4,000 to buy graphic arts technical foundation training, is classroom training and booklets and videos. And then And then I asked the ink vendors, instead of taking me to lunch, I want you to buy me Pocket Pals, which again were little technical books for printing. And so they're buying me more books for my team. And then I asked the mills, the paper mills, instead of taking me out to lunch or flying me up to Canada or Arkansas, and will you give me free paper for my training? Because I'm going to do classroom training and practical training where we're going to spend the whole day running the press, but I don't want it to cost my company anything. So instead of spending me money taking me to lunch, can you take those or flying me to these neat places? Could you just take that money and give me free newsprint? And they said, sure. So they gave me 3 or 4 rolls of newsprint. And then my manager also then gave me the time to do it. And so we did it. Classroom training, hands-on practical training. Okay. A year later, same question, and now I'm over 80%. Feel like they're well trained because many times they knew what to do, but they didn't know why they were doing it. So there's an example of who am I put my internal customers, my employees. And also what happens? Quality goes up and waste goes down. So if you look to the right, there's a T.Q.M belief that is really hard to believe. And that is this: improved quality creates a greater demand because your customers are going to like the product better, and it lowers expenses. So when I talk to you about like, this is really hard to believe. Well, like, how do you want to lower cost? What's my answer all the time? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to improve quality, and that will create a greater demand, and that will always lower expenses. So in order to achieve the lowest expense level, or better, to put it in the positive, to achieve the greatest margin, the answer is always you improve quality and services. It will always give you the best outcome. And there's an example of one. Next, I'm the press room manager at the Baltimore Sun. Got many things on my mind, and I would start my day very early, but I had a partner on the pre-press side, and let's say her name is Dee. That's a good name, Dee. And so one morning I get a call about 6:30 in the morning or so, and Dee says, "Hi, John. Hey, I heard we caused some problems last night. We sent down a bad page. You printed some copies. I want to make sure that nothing got out the door. What did it cost? How did I impact you?" And I go, "Yeah, Dee, I don't know anything about this." And she goes, "Well, aren't you the press room manager?" And I go, "Well, yeah." And she goes, "And you don't know what happened last night?" And I go, "Well, I know some things of what happened last night." I go, "But let me call you back." And so sure enough, we printed a few thousand papers. It was stopped in packaging. And I don't remember the cost. I don't, but it wasn't higher than $2,000. So it was greater than $1,000, and it was less than $2,000. Okay? All right? Because the plate was made, it was hung on press, papers were printed, and then of course we recycled those papers. And let's just tag it at $2,000 as a cost. So I call her back and I let her know those specific details. 6 months goes by. It's 6:30 in the morning, and lo and behold, the extension 6440 comes up. That's right, it's D. And I go, uh-oh, and I shout out, "Did anything bad happen last night?" You know? Nobody was in the press office at the time. So I'm looking at the phone like going, I really don't want to pick up this phone. I really don't want to pick up this phone. But I pick it up. And she goes, "Hi, John, it's Dee. Hey, last night we did it again. We sent you a page that we shouldn't have sent you, and can you let me know what the impact is?" And I'm just silent. And she goes, "You don't know about this, do you?" And I go, "No, I don't." And she said, "Well, haven't we covered this already, John? Aren't you supposed to know about these things?" And I go, "Yes, you're right. And let me get back to you." So I find out that, yes, we made the plate, we hung it on press, but we caught it right away before we saved any copies. So at this point, we're talking about a few hundred dollars, and that's it. A year goes by, something like that, a long time. It's 6:30 in the morning, and the phone rings. And I go, and I don't know nothing bad that happened the night before. We were on time. Everything was good. And I'm sitting there just looking at the phone. And again, nobody's around. And I pick up, and and Dee asked me, hey, we had a bad ad. We sent it down to you. I want to know what the impact is. And she goes, oh my God. And I was silent. And she goes, oh my God, you don't know about this, do you? And she goes, John, what am I going to do with you? And I go, but Dee, wait a minute. I said, hold on. Your team basically makes one mistake a year, because we're on year 2 on this thing. Okay. So maybe once every like 9 months or something, right? So in light of all of that, I asked her, I said, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? I mean, your team is making a mistake, I don't know, it seems like once a year. And she said, John, I'm gathering this information to keep my customers, plate, room, press, packaging, you, John, you're my customer, to keep my team sensitive to that what they do really matters. And I want them to know the impact. Now, in the last example, the plate never even made it to the press room. So the cost of that was just a few dollars. So the point being is, when it comes to quality, about improving quality and processes and integrity and building quality into it, you can see there's the 1-10-100 rule. In other words, if you catch the mistake within your own department, it might cost you $1. If it goes downstream, it might cost you $10. And if it goes down to the client, it costs you $100. Okay? That's the cost of rework, and that's why improving quality is so important, because a T.Q.M leader like Dee understood the 1-10-100 rule. That makes sense? So, yes, that is a true story, by the way. And yes, I did fail at all 3 times. I would have found out about it, but it would have been much later in the morning. But that's a great example of why we do these things, to keep the customer front and center to our employees. Well, I'm going to stop at that. I hope this podcast was a blessing to you. And until next time, God bless.